Welcome to today's episode, brought to you by the Women in Medicine Summit, a transformational CME conference happening September 13th to 14th at the Drake Hotel in Chicago. Engage in leadership programming, learn negotiation skills, receive on-site coaching and mentoring, and see who will win this year's I Stand With Her awards. This year, we're excited to offer unique programming that includes a special session on how using improv comedy can bring fun back into medicine. We also have financial sessions tailored to help you navigate the complexities of personal and professional finances. Discover ways to advance into leadership roles, combat burnout, and either reignite your love for your current role or find joy in a new career path. Don't forget our Friday evening gala, a highlight this year you definitely won't want to miss. Register now at womeninmedicinesummit.org and be part of the movement that is shaping the future of healthcare. Join us to network, learn, and celebrate the power of women in medicine.
Welcome to the Revitalizing Doctor podcast. We interview trailblazers in medicine that embody the Revitalize Women vision to empower women to innovate and influence medicine, to value authenticity, respect, and work-life harmony. We recognize the challenges in medicine, and we're committed to providing coaching-informed strategies to help you go from surviving to thriving. Welcome, my dear listeners. I am thrilled to be here with you today, and we are going to be diving into another captivating episode with world-renowned allyship expert Karen Catlin. We start the conversation by discussing the reasons that gender bias is still so pervasive and tricky to solve in medicine. We then get into how to focus allyship efforts to ensure you're giving from a place of abundance and not burning out when doing all of this important work. And there are so many mega pearls and tangible tips on how to be a better ally and grow allies in your workplace. So this episode is a must listen and a must forward. Allyship is crucial in fostering an inclusive society. But you know what? During this interview, I actually misgender a person I referenced during the interview, which, while you're interviewing a world-renowned expert on allyship, is certainly not what I wanted to do. So it's important that we recognize that we all make mistakes, even those of us who are passionate about promoting inclusivity. Misgendering someone can be hurtful and dismissive of their identity, and it's our responsibility to correct ourselves when it happens. So let me take this opportunity to apologize sincerely for my mistake and ask for your understanding. And I hope leaving this in this episode helps all of us to embody what Brené Brown reminds us, that we're here to get it right, not to be right. I also asked Karen's help on practical tips to use the correct pronouns. So I hope you enjoy this episode, and I'd love to hear your feedback. So hit us up at Revitalize Women on Twitter, LinkedIn, send us an email. I'd love to hear from you about your thoughts on this episode and your own stories related to allyship. I'm thrilled today to have Karen Catlin. She's a leadership coach and acclaimed author and speaker on inclusive workplaces. After spending 25 years building software products and serving as vice president of engineering at Macromedia and Adobe, she witnessed a sharp decline in the number of women working in tech. Frustrated but galvanized, she knew it was time to switch gears, which is exactly the type of guest we love to have on this podcast. Today, Karen coaches women to be stronger leaders and men to be better allies for members of all underrepresented groups. She helps people cultivate ally skills. She's wrote the book, Better Allies Everyday Actions to Create Inclusive, Engaging Workplaces and Belonging in Healthcare. She also published a companion guidebook, The Better Allies Approach to Hiring, with best practices to recruit and hire people from underrepresented groups. In 2020, her unique approach to allyship was featured in the BBC's Ally Track tool. She is a graduate and active alum of Brown University, mentoring students on how to launch their careers. She's also a member of the board of directors of Digital Nest and on the advisory boards for the Women's Club of Silicon Valley and West, Women Entering and Staying in Technology. Where is that for medicine? Hopefully we can discuss that. In 2015, the California State Assembly honored Karen with the Wonder Women Tech Innovator Award for outstanding achievements in business and technology and for being a role model for women. Whoa, that is quite a bio.
I'm blushing over here, but thank you, Andrea. It's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you for sharing my background with your listeners.
I think this is so cool that you're on the podcast because this is such a mashup in a way of guests that we've had recently. We've had a lot of episodes about technology, and then a core value here at Revitalize is making a more inclusive workplace. So I'm really excited to have somebody that sits squarely in both worlds of technology and inclusivity.
Well, that is where I'm coming from. And let's get started. Yeah.
So I'm 13 years into a career in medicine. I still can't believe that when I say it out loud sometimes. And while hopeful, I am still really frustrated by the glass ceiling in medicine. Can you address some of the reasons why we're still, it's like 2023. Why is this pay gap and leadership gap and issues with bias and harassment, all of it so pervasive still?
It's frustrating to me as well. And in doing research for my latest book, which is all about how we can be better allies in healthcare and medicine, I learned so much. I remember talking to one man I interviewed who's an associate dean of medicine. And he mentioned to me that he remembers hearing from med students. They were maybe just a couple of months into med school, and they came to him frustrated because they're like, some of our white male peers are getting research projects, and we didn't even know that was an option, so early on in med school. What's going on here? And he started realizing that many students have almost the equivalent of the old boys network already baked in before they enter med school. Perhaps they've got a parent who's highly connected in their field, for example, who can connect them to research opportunities. Or, and here's a truth bomb he shared with me, there are going to be more opportunities discussed in the men's locker room than in the women's locker room as you are changing for, whatever in the department setting, whether it's the hospital or maybe just using a locker room on the university campus. You're going to hear about more opportunities in the men's room than the women's room, simply because more lab PIs, more chairs of departments and so forth are men and using those same locker rooms. And I don't even want to get into the challenges that non-binary students must face as a result. If we think that it's bad for women, I can only imagine, where do non-binary students even change and have those opportunities to network? But I know your podcast is focused on women, so we'll stick to that. So this old boys network is a thing. It also shows up in other ways. I heard and read about a study of surgical referrals. Someone analyzed 40 million surgical referrals and found that male physicians tend to refer their patients to male surgeons. And of course, that affects the volumes of referrals that women surgeons are going to get and affects pay equity, which you're asking about. And could there just be unconscious bias at play here? Sure. I'm thinking of a successful surgeon. It's an older white man maybe. And so that's who I'm going to be looking for when I refer it. But getting back to that boys network, maybe it's because you play golf with a surgeon. You always go to him to ask him, who should I refer this patient to for this kind of specialty surgery? And of course, they're going to have more of an all-male network. They're called Just Like Me networks that are full of people that are like us because we like hanging out with us, right? So those referrals happen because of that. Or maybe it's because when you go to a professional conference, you tend to hang out again with people like you, get to know other men, and build up your referral network that way. So there are two kind of reasons. I could keep going. You want to hear about one more?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. One more reason that I believe that there is that leadership gap, pay equity gap that you mentioned and asked about is all the busy work, the non-promotable work, the citizenship tasks that tend to go to women and especially women of color. In my book, Belonging in Healthcare, I have a whole chapter on glue work. The glue work is the stuff that needs to get done for the health of a group, the organization, the institution, but it's no one's real job. And then this glue work becomes stuff that people have to volunteer for or are voluntold, of course, to take it on. Things like We need volunteers to staff the vaccination clinic on the weekend. We need to clean out the staff fridge or deep clean our lab once a month. We need to have someone join a project to improve billing efficiency or coding accuracy in our paperwork. We need to think about, a nurse is on duty and is trying to assign in-basket messages to somebody, and the normal doctor, the PCP is not available. So who does that nurse think of? Well, there's that nice woman doctor who never says no or seems to get angry or is never grouchy with me. I'll assign the in-basket message to her. And there's studies showing that women PCPs get more in-basket messages than their male counterparts, 24% in fact. So this glue work, this busy work, these citizenship tasks tend to go to women, and that means they are saddled with busy work. They're not working on things that might be more important to their career, to their patients, and that leads to burnout as well. I am sure of it. So maybe I'll stop there. I could keep talking. We're recording for like 4 hours, right? Just kidding.
Yeah, I mean, this topic is huge.
Yeah, exactly. So, let's just step back. Let's zoom out for a second. I do think the old boys network is in play. I think there's unconscious bias of this is what a successful doctor looks like. It's, it's a man, a white man in a coat who's not living with a disability. It's this outdated model of what success looks like. And we know that's not accurate.
So in a recent discussion I had with some allies at work, there was some discussion of some problematic people, and I would use the term misogynist. And they were kind of focused on like fixing their behaviors. And a shift that really helped me a few years ago is I don't spend time on that group anymore, other than if I witness or experience bad behavior, I'm much quicker to report it in a formal channel if it reaches that level. But I don't try to spend a lot of time in that group anymore because I find them very draining. I try to spend more time on people that I think are good-natured and maybe have some unconscious biases that would be open and receptive. And then the people that, are showing good behaviors already, showing some ally behaviors. What's your thoughts on that? And what does the research show? Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Are you a physician mom with school-aged children feeling utterly exhausted? My friend Dr. Sheeta Shaffi invites you to take a little time this summer to join her in a small, intimate group for meaningful conversations. Dr. Shaffi is an emergency physician, coach, and mom to 8-year-old twins. She understands firsthand what you're going through. This isn't a pizza party or a yoga class. You'll meet for 2 one-hour sessions twice a month starting in July to help you move out of exhaustion, let go of mom guilt, and live a life you're not only proud of, but can truly enjoy. Connect with her on LinkedIn or Instagram at Sheeta Shaffi to learn more. Sheeta is spelled Shideh, and Shaffi is spelled Shafie. You can also check the show notes for a link so you can connect with her there as well.
Yeah, I agree with you in your approach 100%. I also just want to acknowledge there are some people who are never going to change. What's worked for me my whole life, this is not broken. I'm just fine. And by the way, my job isn't to create more equity. My job is to treat patients. Like they're going to have a certain mindset, and we're not going to be able to convince them to change their behavior. I don't waste my time with them either. It's frustrating that it's not a good use of what I am doing. I focus on those people who show, as you said, some positive behaviors, some opening that they are willing to learn about this. What I want to focus on is the people who want to do better and are just either unaware of, I don't understand what the inequity is, or I don't know what to do. There are many people there. I don't know if it's 80% of the population or something like that. I don't think the research has been done, but there are so many people who just want to do better and they just don't know what to do. My approach, and the reason I've written 3 books now on this topic of how people can be better allies, is there are these simple things you can do every day that will make a difference. We don't have to know all of it. We don't have to be experts in DEI. We don't have to be experts in this inequity or the research that is being published about it. But what we can do is learn a few new things to start doing to be more inclusive. These glue tasks I mentioned, the citizenship tasks, the housework, men, you can volunteer to do this yourself, even though people aren't asking you to do it, right? Another thing we can all do is use doctors' titles and other people who have advanced degrees, use their titles consistently. And I'm sure you know about the research and have probably witnessed and experienced men get called by their titles, their honorifics much more than women. And that has been studied at medical conferences as well as other settings. We can also look out for interruptions that happen in our meetings, administrative meetings, or morning rounds or huddles at the starts of shift where people are talking. And if we see someone who gets interrupted, we can say something like, hey, I'd like to hear Dr. Smith finish what they were saying, right? That's an everyday action we can look for doing. Right now, we are talking in June and it's Pride Month. We could all be wearing Pride related pins or our pronouns on our lanyard, on our white coats and so forth, not just during Pride, but year round to show our support to the LGBTQ plus community. One more thing, what's an everyday action? We can refuse to speak on all male panels or all white panels to show that, hey, we believe that there are experts everywhere and there aren't just one group of people who have to be the expert and show that leadership in any topic. These all-male panels, some clever person years ago called them a manel, which I love. The manels are these all-male panels. And Andrea, I want to tell you, just yesterday, I was reading about, there was a World Health Assembly in Geneva about 2 weeks ago. And there was a panel being discussed, some medical topic. I think it was about climate change and medicine or the overlap of those two areas. And one of the doctors, and I want to look at his name here, Dr. Katahi, who's the CEO of AmRest Health Africa, he looked around and he realized, wait a second, this is one of those manels. And he spoke up and he said, I don't speak on all male panels, so I'm going to step down. And if there is someone in the audience who's not a man who would like to come up and take my place, please do. That's an everyday action for people who are public speakers to look out for that. Again, I could go on and on with these everyday actions, but my point is there are simple things we could be doing every day. And getting back to your original question, let's make sure the people who care about this and want to do better know about the role they can play.
Right. So those are great. And I want to keep bringing our audience those tips on here's an everyday action that you can do, you can model, you can encourage our colleagues and to be better allies, as your book says. What's your advice for the listener that maybe they're hearing this and they're like, I like what you're saying, but I'm tired. I'm tired of being the one that has to speak up. I'm tired of the one that has to keep bringing this issue up. And I don't get any extra money for being the inclusive champion at my work. I do think it's important, but I'm tired of carrying this banner. How do you balance those two things?
I get it. In fact, being the inclusive champion for an institution or a department or a workplace is another kind of this glue work that needs to get done, but it is a burden. I get it. This is why I do the work I do to encourage more people to be better allies. So it doesn't fall on the shoulders of just, one or two or a small number of people who have always been doing this work. My goal is to inspire, hopefully, as well as educate people how to start doing this work so we have more people who are looking out for it. I also believe, ideally, Andrea, my audience would be the white men out there, but I love having anyone, and I believe anyone can be a better ally, but I really want to reach the white men out there, the white men who have all that power and privilege, and have them start acting more inclusively. Because when they start doing this work, and if they are seen as a respected member of their group, they are going to encourage more behavior. You get that ripple effect in action where people start, when we all do this, we imitate people, we act like people we respect. And so if I can get more of the people who have a ton of respect already acting as better allies, it's just is going to ripple out from there. And we're going to see a lot more of these everyday actions happening. And I see it happening with companies that I speak at who hold book clubs on my book. I hear stories about how this actually happens. So I'm very hopeful. I am very hopeful.
Absolutely. And I think that ties into a concept that we talk a lot about at Revitalize is you have to pour from a full cup. Yeah. And I just had an issue that came up at work. Well, I wouldn't say it just came up. It was something that happened. It was brought to my attention a couple of months ago. And it was like many of these issues, it was subtle. There were nuances. It was a little bit complicated. You could see how from different perspectives, it could be perceived differently. And it was also hitting at a time that my bandwidth was just really, really low. And I didn't really have the mental clarity on what to do. It was there. It was still nagging at me. And I had tried to kind of nudge and make some inroads into what I thought could help some people do the right thing in a more subtle way. And then finally it came to a head this week that I was like, all right, well, this hasn't been addressed. So I'm going to have to be more courageous about it and just call it out in a respectful, professional way. But I had to wait until my cup was full enough and that I had the clarity and that I could do it in a measured, respectful way that could be well received. And I'm really glad to say that it was. But it's taken me so much time to get to a place where if I don't have the right response in the moment, that I forgive myself for that and that I will come back to it.
Yes, you have to do what is right for you, healthy for you. And as you mentioned, it's not just because you were feeling exhausted that you didn't want to do this. You knew you wouldn't show up in the right way. You maybe not have that calm inner voice that would allow you to convey the point or the suggestion of concern in a way that was going to be heard. So you're doing the right thing there. Absolutely. I must admit, in the work I do, I frequently get questions from people who are trying to have the conversations that you are alluding to there. I don't know the details and don't need to, but people reach out to me like, this is going on. What should I be doing differently? How can I approach this? And one of my approaches that I convey is you have to be in the right. Yeah, I love that full cup kind of space. You have to have that full cup so you can do this work. Sometimes it's not worth it. We all have to choose our battles, so to speak, or the hills we're going to climb, and that's fine too. But then the approach that I take is this wonderful phrase. It's called be curious, not furious. Be curious is someone who just said something off the cuff or perhaps even more biased or did something that was not appropriate from an inclusive lens. And be curious about it. Ask some questions. Tell me more about how you feel. Tell me, what makes you think that? Those type of questions you should be delivering them in your calmest voice because you should be curious as opposed to that furious, which is that furious feeling that is so natural because we're either getting our defenses up or we're just plain tired and angry about what just happened. When we can be curious and not furious, we can have that dialogue. We can potentially find some common ground and potentially get that energy we need to have that productive conversation.
I love that so much. That made me think we actually do have an episode that I'm working on. Well, a type of episode called Ally Corner. And Mehrdad Soleimani was our inaugural man that came onto the podcast to be featured about. I brought him on because he does such a wonderful job being an ally in our workplace. And I think Mehrdad does a fantastic job of not doing what I'm about to ask you about. So we want to bring in more allies, but there is a phenomenon that can occur mostly with men in which they exhibit, I believe the term is benevolent sexism, that they're coming from a good place, but they want to be the knight in shining armor. And so now there's probably a man that will be listening to this podcast like, man, Andrea, you just don't know what you want. You want us to be allies, and now you're going to tell me that I'm not doing it the right way. Can you explain what that is and maybe some practical tips for both men that might be listening and then women or non-binary people that would be like, hey, how can you coach somebody to still hold on to what we think is a good attribute that they're trying to do, but do it in a way that kind of lands better?
Oh my gosh, so much here. Yes. Benevolent sexism. Let's just define that. And and you asked me about 3 or 4 questions in here. So let me start out with defining benevolent sexism. It basically means, hey, I know what's best for you. I, being any gender, know what's best for you of a different gender. And I'm going to protect you as a result. I'm going to make decisions on your behalf that are in your best interest. And it's usually because men are making decisions and in more leadership roles. It's usually men doing it for women, making decisions on their behalf, but it could be women doing it for other women, and it could be any gender doing it for another gender. So I want to acknowledge that. But I have a story of a time that I witnessed benevolent sexism. I didn't even know it was called that, but I fortunately thought of the right things to say in the moment. This was many years ago. I was an executive in tech, and there was a man who reported to me who had a new headcount that he got to hire for. And I was asking him, like, what's the responsibility set that you are thinking about putting in this new headcount? And he described it. And then I was realizing, like, this would be perfect for, and I'll call her Sue, I'll make up the name, but this would be perfect for Sue, who's already on his team and is ready for more responsibility. So I said to him, sounds like a great opportunity for Sue, who happens to be your top performer. We had just done performance ratings. She's your top performer. I think she's, do you think she'd be interested in this? And he said, and this is benevolent sexism, folks, in the field, he said, oh no, she has 2 young children at home. She would not want all the travel that would come with this new role. And I said, oh, really? Are you sure? Have you asked her? Because I think that should be her decision, not yours. Now, fortunately, he listened to me. He went and talked to Sue. She said, yes, I want this new job. However, her family situation and home situation was set up. The travel was not going to be an issue for her. But he thought he was saving her from all that travel that would probably cause, all sorts of family issues. Oh no, she could handle it. So that is benevolent sexism. And a quick side note here, there are other kinds of benevolent bias. Benevolent ableism might look like, oh, I'll go give that conference talk for our co-authored paper because I don't want the airline to damage your wheelchair in transit. So I'll go give the talk, right? I'll do that for you. Benevolent ageism is another kind. I know she doesn't like to drive at night anymore, so I won't even invite her to that important dinner with all these VIPs, right? That's benevolent ageism. So that's what the benevolent bias looks like. Now, what can we do as allies? Well, we can do what I said is let's ask that person. Let's not make that decision on their behalf. We can look out for people who are making decisions for other people and just speak up with, I think that we should ask them. We should check in with them, whatever that might look like in your own words. And in fact, I'll just say another quick story here. I recently listened to Gloria Steinem, who shared a story that she probably shared numerous times. It was the first time I heard it, but it was a time she was an undergrad studying ecology and was going on a field trip to a river. And she noticed this turtle going up the bank. Have you heard this story? You're smiling.
I'm smiling because I want you to finish it, but it's from when I think it was on Glennon Doyle's podcast, right? But please say it because it is so good and it is so apropos to this conversation.
Yeah. Okay. I'm a fan of Glennon Doyle's podcast. Also, we can do hard things. It's such a good mantra. So Gloria Steinem's on this field trip. She sees this turtle that's made its way up the river bank and away from the river. And they were down in the river studying whatever. And she then climbed up the river bank, picked up that turtle. It was very heavy. It was large, but she picked it up. She's like, I'm going to help this turtle get back to the river. And she put it in the river and it swam away. And her professor then came up behind her and said, do you know what you just did? She said, yeah, I helped the turtle get back to the river. That's where the turtle should be. And he's like, that turtle probably spent days crawling up the riverbank to get to the point that it was at, and it's looking for a place to nest. And you now have released it back into the water. It's got to go through that all over again. So now, ever since then, Gloria Steinem has used that. Is it a metaphor? I think it's a, whatever anecdote for her activism work too. We should always ask the turtle, What do they need help with? What do they want to be doing? What is best for them? Because as allies, we may think we know. She wouldn't want the travel. She wouldn't want this new job. The turtle needs to get back to the river. We think we may know, but we can always check in.
Yeah. And I think this links to something that I've been observing a lot. And part of it is being an emergency doctor. We do, I think, sometimes struggle with being too rushed in translating some of that false urgency into leadership and team dynamics. And so what I find myself doing, which sometimes is very frustrating to people working around me, is now often saying like, I think we need to check in with this person or, this team. I don't think we need to make a decision right now, where people often are trying to check something off there. Well, I want this person to do it. Well, like we haven't really spent enough time making sure we're being more inclusive in this decision. So do you notice that? I'm guessing with your tech background, people also like want to move fast. Do you think that's some of the organizational psychology that we're bumping up against?
They want to move fast, absolutely. Or they've just got higher priority things, like everybody's to-do list. It's just way too long. I see that in tech. And I get the emergency department, the adrenaline rush that comes with just all the activity and that desire to triage, get patients sorted and so forth. What's interesting to me, and I getting back to my book, I have a chapter called Knights versus Allies in the book. And what I wanted to do and explore there in that chapter is talk about how, we can feel at times that we want to save one person. We want to help one person. We see something happening that we know we can speak up and step in and help mitigate. And I don't want to discourage that. I don't want to discourage people from taking action that they feel like I just have to do something right now. Yet at the same time, I want people to step back and think, is there something I can be doing to have a more systemic change, have a more systemic impact? And I know that so many people get into medicine and healthcare in general because you want to save people. I mean, that's part of, I don't want to call you all savior complex people, but that's probably what drew you to medicine is you want to help people. So help people, absolutely. Yet ask yourself, is there something I can be doing to have a bigger impact here? What's an example of that? In my book, I talked to a nurse who was noticing that one of her colleagues who'd got training in another country, I believe it was Japan, was not being paid for all the years of service and work that she had behind her in Japan, which she moved to the United States. She wasn't getting credit for all those years of work. And this one nurse spoke up on her behalf, advocating that she get paid for appropriately for all those years. But also, and this is how we can have a bigger impact and act more like an ally than that knight in shining armor. She also reached out to her union and recommended that there be language added to the next contract negotiation process that they were going through so that anyone who got training in another country who had the licensing could get paid at the right and appropriate and equitable amount. That's an example of kind of upping the impact you can have. One more example I want to share here, because it's such a good story, and it has to do with emergency medicine. I spoke with an emergency medicine doctor who happened to just notice that one of her older colleagues looked really tired after an overnight shift. And she spoke to him. She said, do you mind if I ask, how old are you? And I think he said 67. She said, I think we have a policy that after a certain age, after age 60, you don't have to sign up for overnight shifts anymore. You don't have to do them. I think that's a policy we have. Well, he had no idea. So she said, can I look into that for you? Sure. She looked into it. And yes, that policy was in place for people. I want to say it was over 60. It might have been something else, as well as pregnant people in their second and third trimester. They didn't have to do overnight shifts as well. And she talked to their shift scheduler and she's like, people don't know about this. And they're like, yeah, you have to ask about it. What did she do? She started a process to have that be part of the onboarding training for new people joining the staff, as well as I think it was put in a newsletter periodically as well to just get the word out. that's an example of not just saving that 167-year-old tired-looking doctor, but making sure that everyone knew about the policy and could ask about it if that's something that they wanted to, request.
And I love that. And I'll take it maybe one step higher. And I'm interested in your thought on that is you have to opt out. Like everyone's assumed that, I mean, it maybe gets into some HR privacy things, but when possible, build this in that the person doesn't have to raise their hand and say, now I don't want to work night shifts anymore. It's just part of the standard processing. And, women should be able to choose when they share that they're pregnant, but there always gets to be a point where they have to share that information. It's different for every person. But when they get to that point that it's like, oh, great, we have this policy and procedure in place. We will remove you from the night shifts. You won't have to make them up. I'm a big fan of not having a lot of groups are like, yes, you won't have to work any of the night shifts, but we're going to get you on the back end or the front end. And that ends up having a really detrimental effect as well. So, I challenge listeners to think about ways and work. I mean, also go back to ask to use the analogy of the turtles and ask what would work for them. Like, how would that opting out process work in a way that's safe?
Exactly. 100% what you just said.
Thank you for listening to The Revitalizing Doctor. We have an exclusive offer for our listeners. Get 20% off your Epocrates subscription. To redeem, go to the website epocrates.com and log in to your account. Click on the payment and subscription link to redeem the discount using code REVDOC20. That's all caps REVDOC20. This offer is good for new subscribers and cannot be applied to active Epocrates Plus subscriptions. Thank you for listening. Now back to the show.
There's so much here. I could just ask you questions all day, but I want to go with something that's fresh of mind. And now that I know we're both Glennon Doyle fans, have you heard her I think it was the most recent episode with Andrea Gibson?
Oh, yeah. I was walking just over the weekend and listened to that podcast. That was a powerful one. I must say, I don't like walking in my, out getting exercise. And that one that got tears in my eyes. I must admit, it was a little frustrating from that point of view, but it was really powerful. Yes.
Yeah. So to catch our listeners up, Andrea Gibson is a writer and poet, and we'll link to that episode in the show notes. And Andrea shared that she has metastatic ovarian cancer. And it was a very raw conversation about mortality and just a whole host of life lessons, but pulling in the part that's really about allyship and building a more inclusive world. Andrea references Pema Chodron about that we can't expect the world to be covered in leather, so we better wrap our own feet in leather. And the idea is essentially that there's a lot of, again, there's so much nuance in this space around we should call out and feel comfortable saying when there's bias in the world, but we also have to, it's such a trigger word for healthcare workers right now to say resilience, because we have resilience in spades. So how do you walk that line between, you got to have some toughness, mental toughness to be able to do this work, to make the change that we need? How do you navigate that? What do you tell your clients?
First of all, a quick note here. I think Andrea Gibson goes by they, them pronouns. So if I refer to them moving forward, I'm going to use they, them pronouns. I think that was how Glennon Doyle was referring to them. But that resilience, if I know that's so important. Here's personally what I do to wrap my feet in leather. I need solidarity with other women. And, you mentioned in my bio that I am an advisor to a couple of different women's groups. And those have been so powerful and important for me, knowing it's a sisterhood of people who have experienced similar things, who validate what I have been experiencing or seeing, who give me language to talk about it, who give me inspiration of success in maybe different ways than I had been thinking. And I'm also, in addition to like women's leadership circles, I'm also in a online group for women who are authors and public speakers. And let me tell you, not only is the support there in terms of just like I feel like I'm with my people, but we share information. We share information about vendors to use or not use. We share information about speaking fees we charge. We provide so much support as we all are navigating our business lives. And it's so powerful. So, I'm such a big believer in women's groups. And I know, I believe you run mastermind groups for women physicians, which I'm sure is meeting that need as well. Of let's get women together and be, it's 1 + 1 = 3, not just 2 in my mind. And I love listening to podcasts by women podcasters, Glennon Doyle being one. And in addition to your podcast, there are so many podcasts that women are creating and delivering, a unique perspective that is different potentially than the male's perspective that is so out there in so many of our media channels that we consume every day.
Well, I want to just thank you for correcting the pronoun that I used inadvertently. And I actually, if it's okay with you, I kind of want to workshop that issue for me, because I'm going to be a bit vulnerable here, but this is what our podcast does. I believe this is a brave space. And I know the person that I'm talking about would be okay with this. I'm not going to use her name right now. I have a colleague that is going through the gender transformation process. And when I met this colleague, he identified as he and now is moving to she and has done a lot of work on outward appearance, moving towards looking like a woman, and wants us to be using the she, her, hers pronouns. And I know that. And I want to use those pronouns. And I care a lot about words. I like to write. And this matters to me on a visceral, emotional, cognitive level. But I still find myself misgendering her. And it hurts me when I do it. She is being incredibly gracious and patient with me. And I've said many times when I do it, correct me. And she does every time. Every time, she'll very gently say, or, I catch myself most of the time and I'm like, damn it, I just did it again. And I think I've identified the issue. Well, part of it is a voice thing that I think I cue very much on voice. And in my head, I'm not hearing a feminine voice, and it's a really hard cognitive block. What is your advice? Give me a little window into some of the coaching that you would do around that. And you can be as brutal as you need to be, because I think this is helpful to the audience.
I don't know if I want to be brutal. I don't think that's my style, but I'm so glad we were talking about this. I am feeling very much similar to what you just shared. And even with Andrea Gibson, they have the same first name as you. And Andrea is a typical feminine name. So of course we naturally just go there because we assume, and that's fine. We've made that assumption. I have misgendered people, use the wrong pronouns so many times too. I have trouble figuring this out sometimes, or remembering someone who has started using different pronouns, whether they're going through the gender transition process or just choosing to use different pronouns and because they're non-binary or for whatever other reason. So I get it. It's hard. One thing I'll say don't do, and this is what I have learned from a number of people who are non-binary, do not do this. Do not make it all about yourself every time you make a mistake. Oh, shoot, I did it again. I'm trying to remember. I am N years old and this is just hard for me. And whatever the excuse might be, your name reminds me of, it feels feminine, or your voice does not sound feminine to me. This is why I have such a hard time with this. I'm sorry. All of a sudden, we've made this thing into a much bigger deal than it needs to be. And frankly, it's awkward. It's awkward for that person to sit there and have to listen to you make it all about yourself and make all these excuses. So don't do that. When you do use the wrong pronouns, simply apologize and move on. Simply say, Andrea Gibson, Andrea Gibson, they are, and just move on. So you can say, I'm sorry if that's it, but don't make it into a big deal. The best thing is just like, imagine you're just like you tripped over something on the street. You just kind of pick yourself up and keep walking. So try to do that the next time, even though it's tempting to explain that you really are trying to do this work. Two other things I've learned. One is from a woman, Jeannie Gainsbourg, who has an incredible book that is focused on allyship for the LGBTQ plus community. I love her book. It's called The Savvy Ally. And one thing she recommends is if you have them in your contact list on your phone, is actually put their pronoun there, right as part of their first name, right after their first name, put their pronoun in parentheses. So every time you get a text message from them or a phone call, their pronoun's right there in front of you. So that can be helpful as well. And then another tip, and this is something I'm trying to do, is to get just more comfortable with using they, them as a singular pronoun. And this maybe isn't exactly the case with your colleague, but it's helping me not make the assumptions that I otherwise would make. And that is when I am meeting with potential clients, I always take notes about those meetings, and I am forcing myself to use the word they as a singular pronoun to talk about that client, even though they may not use that as a pronoun. But in my notes, I'm trying to get more comfortable with using they, so that the next time I meet someone, I'm talking about someone and I can just more comfortably use that pronoun they, because I don't know what pronoun that they use. Does that help you?
It does. It's such a great reminder that, anytime, regardless if it's a pronoun thing or something else that happens that is biased, don't make it about you. I think anybody who's experienced bias before, the worst thing, and many people have stories of how they're consoling the person that just did something that affronted them. And there are few things that are more infuriating than that. So that's a great reminder for me. We are in Pride. And honestly, most months now have a different theme or several different themes that can be linked to inclusivity. What is your advice for moving beyond performative allyship? Maybe one or two practical tips for somebody that they have it in their heart. They really do care about the LGBTQ plus community, and they've got their rainbow gear out. How could they move a little bit more and maybe be a little less grating to some of their colleagues that are only picking up on the performative or what could be perceived as performative elements of, we'll use Pride since it's this month?
Yeah, performative allyship is a huge topic. And as I think about supporting the LGBTQ community, I think the Human Rights Campaign on their website right now has the message, Pride is more than just a parade. And that message of we can be doing things. Frankly, one thing I demonstrated in today's podcast is if we notice someone using the wrong pronouns or assuming that someone is in a relationship with someone of a different gender, something like, hey, I see a new ring on your finger. Who's the lucky guy or something like that, as opposed to, are you getting married soon? Are you in a partnership? If we see someone using the wrong pronouns or making assumptions that someone is not homosexual, maybe there's something we can say and speak up when we notice that, as I did earlier, hopefully in a way that was respectful to you, Andrea. What else can we do? I have a weekly newsletter, and I was just putting the finishing touches on this week's newsletter. And it's always very practical. It's called 5 Ally Actions. There's things that people can learn from and do and hopefully pick up and run with. But one thing I wrote this week was support transgender colleagues by helping make sure that their new names can be recognized in your employee HR systems. Now, you might not be in HR or anything, but can you advocate for that? Yes. Now, here's the thing. Many people who are transgendered, that's not the right word to use, who are going through a gender transition process may not yet have changed their name legally. It's expensive. There's a lot of paperwork. Some places you need to have judges' approval to do this, and not all judges are LGBTQ plus friendly. And there's some places where you have to actually post a public announcement in a newspaper before your name will be approved. And many transgender people aren't going to do that because of personal safety concerns. So there are many reasons people don't change their name legally, but they are using their name as part of the transition process. And you can be using that, but is it actually in the HR systems? Is it in the Zoom accounts that automatically get created? Is it used in email addresses? Is it used in template letters that are going out about benefits or anything else, shift assignments and so forth? Are there new names, their chosen names, their real names being used, or are all these systems baked into their legal names that are part of the HR record? Ask about that. Ask about if your institution recognizes the new names for transgender people. And if not, what can be done about that? So that's something that we can do. That's way beyond performative allyship. That is taking some action and using your privilege and positions of power and comfort to make change for others. One last thing about pride too. Let's face it. Year round now, there are just disturbing traumatic events that are happening for the LGBTQ plus community, whether that is legislation against gender affirming care, whether it is bathroom bills restricting access to what bathrooms people can use, whether it is violence against the LGBTQ plus community. There's just so much news that is full of, it's hard, it's traumatic. If you are close to someone who's a member of that community, a coworker, the next time one of these events, these highly public events, is impacting them or people like them, you may not know what to say, but it's okay. And you should reach out and say, I've been paying attention to the news and I thought of you. How are you doing? They may say, fine, I'm fine, no problem. But they may want to talk about it. And for you to recognize that you realize this may be something that they are bringing into work and carrying as some additional weight that day, that week, that month, could mean all the difference in the world for them being seen, feeling welcome, feeling respected, feeling loved.
I love that so much. And it gets into the organizational psychology that people need belonging and connection. And that is an example of a very practical tip, which is a great link to all of your books and your newsletters. I am on your newsletter list and I love it. I forwarded it to several of my colleagues already. So can you tell us, healthcare, everybody needs this work, but I think your message rings so clear and true from my experiences being in healthcare. So how can our listeners connect with you?
Yes. betterallies.com is the website, and it has more information about my books, book club discussion guides if you want to do that with a group in your workplace. And it has information about subscribing to my newsletter. And if you're like me, I have this mindset of before I subscribe to a newsletter, I actually want to check out some previous editions so I know what I'm getting. The archives are all linked there too. So you can easily find those archives and take a peek before you actually subscribe. So betterallies.com is my website. And then on Instagram and Twitter, I'm at betterallies. And if you want to follow me on LinkedIn, I'm Karen Catlin on LinkedIn.
Amazing. My goodness. I can't wait to have you back on the podcast because I think we really just scratched the surface. We went off script a lot because we got into some really interesting things. And I hope this provides a template for people. I'm telling my sound editor right now, don't cut out the part where we got into how to deal with, making a mistake. And I think it's really hard for doctors in particular. I'm sure you dealt with a lot of egos in tech as well about, I keep coming back to the phrase from Brene Brown, I'm not here to be right, I'm here to get it right. And I have to keep telling myself that with all of these issues, that this is bigger than me. My ego will be okay. It's bigger than me.
And in addition, I'm really inspired by a quote by Maya Angelou, who said, "We do the best we can until we know better. And when we know better, we do better."
That's a perfect way to end the episode. Well, thank you so much, Karen. This has been amazing.
Pleasure is all mine, Andrea. Thank you. It was fun, even though this topic is really heavy. It was a pleasure talking with you.
Thanks for listening to The Revitalizing Doctor, a project of Revitalize Women Physician Circle. Our mission is to connect women physicians and allies through innovative, value-based coaching methods that align trust, support, accountability, and skill development to ignite the courage and clarity necessary to take bold actions, create change, and thrive. If you're interested in working with us, check out our website at peoplealwayshcc.com/revitalize or email us at revitalizemm.info@gmail.com. This podcast represents the views of our host and guest. It does not reflect the views of any institution we work for or with.
Hi, it's Dr. Risa E. Lewis, dropping in to tell you about a book that Dr. Adara Landry and I wrote. It's called Microskills, Small Actions, Big Impact. It's a business self-help book coming in 2024 by HarperCollins. Pre-order now. Microskills, Small Actions, Big Impact, wherever you buy your books.